Alright guys, today we are going to be reacting to what if Germany won World War II Part 1. Thank you so much for the support guys. I like these videos. I'm very interested regarding World War II, German history, language, bread, everything man. We're going to jump in here, see what's going on guys. Be open to just comment in my comment section below. Of course, keep it respectful. But we're gonna jump in, guys. Thank you so much for the 5,000 subscriber. We're almost getting to that 5,200 subscriber, guys. It's becoming, man, this is unreal. German's audience is very special for me because you guys, you guys have done a lot to my channel, and I really appreciate that. And I just want to get to that 10,000 subscribers, guys. I'm telling you. I just want to get to that 10,000 subscribers. And make sure you guys like and subscribe. Let's jump in.
Transformed the destiny of mankind. Not only was it the most destructive conflict in human history, but it was the ultimate clash of ideologies and factions which had slowly evolved for centuries. In our timeline, after years of war, the Third Reich was obliterated, Hitler committed suicide, and a violent ideology died with him. In the aftermath, the victors, the Allies, organized the entire world in a manner which would never allow such an occurrence to happen again. They were able to shape mankind's future in their image. Today we are globalized, connected both economically and socially. The internet, American influence, all can be tied back to the victors of that war. The reason I say this is because many don't think about the world today in any other way than the natural evolution of progress. Yet it is not. If the war's outcome had been any different, Western civilization from every aspect of life would have been radically changed. What if the Allies did not defeat Nazi Germany? What if in an alternate timeline, the Third Reich, through military might and conquest, conquered Europe and won World War II? I'm going to explore the effects of a Nazi victory on the human and global scale.
Okay.
How would it transform the 20th and 21st centuries? In American schools, Nazi imagery and teachings are only mentioned in brief generalizations. We all know Nazi policies were anti-Semitic, racist, authoritarian, etc., but rarely is the ideology itself analyzed. In this alternate scenario, I'm not going to specifically focus on what Germans could have done differently to have won the war. This has been debated by numerous historians. What I want to focus on is what such a world would look like if Hitler's plans were allowed to be put into action. Here is one scenario. In this alternate timeline, Nazi Germany has launched a successful invasion of Europe. Britain, France, Poland, the Eastern Soviet Union, and numerous other countries all have been occupied by German troops. Somehow Germany invaded Britain, and facing overwhelming odds, even though Churchill promised not to, the British are forced to surrender, or be basically annihilated. In this alternate timeline, the Third Reich consolidates control over the new land it is occupied across the continent, making any effective American incursion impossible. At first, resistance movements would fight against the Germans in puppet fascists like in Vichy France and the UK, but after years of strengthening control over trade and resources, the Third Reich basically starves out any opposition. The Germans in our timeline, and in this alternate one, would massacre innocent civilians in retaliation for insurgency. With this tactic and low resources, resistance would fall pretty quickly. In the Soviet Union, the war between the Russians and Germans drags into a stalemate, eventually devolving into a resistance movement as the Russians are pushed back to the Urals.
Wow.
How this could have occurred, I'm not going to specify, but if the Nazis' plan succeeded, then the Soviet government is pushed further into Siberia, but the bulk of the population is now under German control. Nazism cannot be registered on how we traditionally think on the political scale. It is an entirely new beast, one that takes elements from across the spectrum to reinvent society into something entirely new. Hitler's new order was to be a civilization that threw away centuries of Western teachings, including the ideas of the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, and Christianity.
Wow.
A civilization that bases everything on the spread and domination of a specific group, the Aryan race. To understand a world where the Germans won World War II, we need to understand the concepts of Nazism and their horrific ideas of racial superiority and classification. If Nazi Germany won the war, they would reorganize Europe based on racial hierarchies. Since eugenics was popular, the Nazis based their policies off of genetics and ranked people off of positive and supposed inferior genes. At the top was the Aryan race. Aryans to the Nazis were people of Germanic descent. This meant pure ethnic Germans had the highest status among the Nazi society. Just below true Aryans were Western Europeans, such as the British, Northern French, Irish, and Dutch. The Chinese and Japanese were also at this level, as Hitler declared them honorary Aryans. Below them were the Mediterranean race, Southern and Tanner Europeans such as Italians, Southern French, Spanish, and Greeks. Hitler believed Southern Europeans were naturally more lazy than the Northerners. This thought of Italian inferiority to Germans caused a lot of tension between Mussolini and Hitler. I'll talk about how this will play out later.
Wow.
Skipping past a few levels, at the very bottom were the Untermensch. These were racial groups the Nazis considered too inferior or dangerous to live. These were the Slavs, such as the Poles, Russians, and Ukrainians, Jews, Roma, homosexuals, communists, etc. In this alternate timeline, if Germany was able to successfully implement Lebensraum, after decades of German control, Poland, Russia, and the Eastern Slavs would cease to exist.
Wow.
The Slavic people of Eastern Europe would face a genocide 10 times larger than that of the Holocaust in our timeline, mass extermination in the tens of millions. Hitler was a fan of how the United States successfully depopulated and pushed back the American Indians, and so he wanted to recreate this against the Slavs. In this alternate timeline, following
That's a lie. Oh my God. Man, our education system sucks. My God, the reason that we had depopulation, it was not because we were just deleting them. It's just they got sick because European diseases. It happens everywhere, even in Latin America. It happens the same. Latin America managed to just slow it down because a lot of them got used to it. Actually, it was the opposite. A lot of Europeans were having their diseases, but they adapted. Right in Puerto Rico, we have the same problem. Because we have a high density of Europeans, so when they came, they really contaminated, I would say, indirectly, right? The local population, but it has nothing to do with that we were there just deleting them with guns. It didn't happen like that, guys. Sorry, didn't happen like that. Sorry. We did have war for territory, that is. But mostly it was 90%. Because of diseases, Europeans' diseases.
German victory, borders are redrawn arbitrarily and governments are set up in what was formerly Poland, Ukraine, and the Russian states, now with German leaders. Slavs begin to lose rights, resistance is met with entire towns being slaughtered, and Jews are immediately sent into concentration camps, as they were to be automatically killed. The Slavic people were to become enslaved, and used as a mass labor force to contribute to the German war machine, and farm the land if need be. But first, most of the population would need to die. Laws are passed similar to Stalin's policies, causing mass starvation, and soon millions die in a massive famine. In our timeline, Hitler's plan was for over 50 million to die before colonization could begin. Over a period of a few years, once the natives no longer exist as a nation, German colonists began moving and colonizing former Slavic lands. Germany as a country is quadrupled in size, expanding from France to the center of Russia. The few Slavs deemed acceptable for Germanization are forced to only have children with Germans to eventually breed out the Slavic genes. The culture of these lands would be destroyed and torched. History of the people forgotten under Nazi genocide. With the massive industrial scale of the Third Reich and resistance defeated, they could easily be capable of such an atrocity. The German school systems would teach young Germans the inferiority of the Slavs, creating a new racial divide between German Aryans and enslaved Slavic people. Very similar to situations in apartheid South Africa, racial segregation and outright atrocities would occur between German colonial masters and enslaved Russians in the Ukraine colonies. Slavs would be banned from reproducing except to create new slaves. In fact, across Nazi Germany, abortion would not only be legal, but mandatory for non-Aryans. It would remain illegal for Aryan mothers, as German women would be expected to reproduce as much as possible. Mass sterilization would be enforced against parents who gave birth to unhealthy children, or kids born with Down syndrome or developmental illnesses. German colonists would farm the fertile lands of the Ukraine, and use the vast breadbasket to feed a growing German population. If successful, Nazi Germany would redefine the demographics of Europe, and in a few decades, most of the population in Eastern Europe would be of German descent. The new order meant a complete reinvention of what it meant to be European, and a member of Western civilization. Nazi Germany would be the leading dominant nation of Europe, and be the puppet master to the countless fascist governments of the UK, France, Italy, and Spain. Even though propaganda would boast an equal union of European nations, in reality, some nations, even fascist ones, would be lower than others. Hitler's racial criteria would determine Nazi relationships, and so German policies would favor more Aryan nations like France and Britain over Mediterranean countries like Spain and Italy. In this alternate timeline, with the war over, the Nazis would immediately rebuild Britain, and fascist Britain would become the right-hand man to the Reich. As for the Italians, even in our timeline, Mussolini knew the disdain Hitler had for Southern Europeans, and it greatly affected the relationship between the two. Mussolini's call for a unity between the Nordic and Mediterranean races fell on deaf ears for the Nazis. In this alternate timeline, I predict Hitler simply would have tolerated Southern Europe for the sake of stability, while playing favorites with the Nordic French and British. This split would grow even larger in the following decades, becoming a culture clash between the two regions. In our timeline, the Holocaust was only supposed to be the first phase of the New Order, immediate genocide of undesirables within German borders. However, these were not the only groups the Nazis wished to silence. Nazism at its core was shaped by the idea of a race united under the full allegiance to the state and only the state. Citizens were to contribute militarily and technologically to advance the German race.
This is so different from the other one, right? Like, I mean, this is like very... I don't know if this one will be kind of practical. This is way over the line. I think the other one that we reacted, that one was more practical politically. More practical. Like they expanded only to Poland, to the old territories. And that's it. And they even give it France back, I guess. Right? And then politically it has more leverage. This is, I don't know about this, man. Because I don't know if the guy with the mustache had that much of a greed to conquer the entire Eastern Front. I don't think so. He wanted to just get some. In my opinion, I think he wanted to just get the oil. Because without oil, you're not creating anything.
To Hitler and the Third Reich, any idea that took focus away from the state was an enemy. Removing the Jewish question was the first phase of the New Order. The Slavs were next, and after that, Catholicism itself, or the church question. Hitler was born a Catholic, but grew to hate the church as he became an adult. His views fell perfectly in line with the Nazi ideology. Nazism viewed Catholicism as not only an obstacle, but a threat to the progress of the German state. They despised the idea of a non-governmental force having influence over Europeans and Aryans. Before the war, Nazis closed Catholic institutions, barred Catholic messages, and arrested many members of the clergy. However, in part with his alliance with Italy and to stop instability, Hitler made a treaty with the Vatican to respect Catholic institutions. Yet to the Nazis, Catholics remained a prominent threat. In this alternate timeline after the war, the Nazis would immediately break the agreement with the Vatican. Across Germany and its occupied territories, Catholic institutions would be closed and its clergymen arrested. In Hitler's eyes, religion itself was fundamentally incompatible and dangerous to the progress of Europe. He even called those who were religious slaves. At the time, the Nazis had to put up a face of being Protestant Christians, but secretly, the highest ranks, like
I should not be laughing at that. Jesus. Stop. Man, I should not be laughing about this, man. This is funny, man. Oh, shoot.
Had to put up a face of being Protestant Christians, but secretly, the highest ranks, like Joseph Goebbels, despised religion and Catholicism, yet they decided to postpone any action until after the war. They believed it was a foreign invention which promoted Jewry and made Europeans weak-minded and too merciful. Heinrich Himmler even wrote, "We live in an era of the ultimate conflict with Christianity. It is a part of the mission of the SS to give the German people in the next half-century the non-Christian ideological foundations on which to lead and shape their lives. This task does not consist solely in overcoming an ideological opponent, but must be accompanied at every step by a positive impetus. In this case, that means the reconstruction of the German heritage in the widest and most comprehensive sense. In this alternate timeline, the Third Reich would have used everything to slowly strangle Christianity in its borders. Propaganda to paint Catholics at first as enemies of Aryans and Germans, and even secret violence against Catholic leaders, the same tactics which divided Europeans just as they did between Slavs and Germans. Over the decades, Catholicism would be stripped from Nazi Germany. Most of the Catholic Poles would have been killed in the hunger policies. In German Catholic regions, simple Nazi propaganda would be used to snuff out the church. Laws banning Catholic education and press would be enacted. After the Catholic Church, the Third Reich would actively discourage Christianity itself. And if decades of propaganda would work, they could create a generation of loyal, non-Christian Germans. Nazis would teach that the religion was a destructive, brainwashing Jewish force which weakened native Europeans. Some Nazis even wished to replace Christianity with neo-paganism. But in this timeline, religion would be replaced with loyalty to the Nazi regime and to the race. The swastika would replace the cross across much of German Europe. This scenario is going to be a part of a new series. I don't know how many parts it will be, but I want to focus in detail on every aspect of life in this alternate scenario. I don't want to rush it.
Yeah, I don't know about this one. Like you're saying, like if they want, it seems like the way he portraying it is, if they wanted with no political movement. Like I don't think, because then you have to take into account the massive losses that your army will probably take to just conquer all that land. Probably, I would say 3/4 of your population probably dismantled. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know about this.
World War II was a defining moment that decided the history of Western civilization. In the Allied victory, Nazism was destroyed and never returned to power. But had the victory gone to Germany, the modern world would have evolved and taken a much darker turn. Over the next few videos, I'll explore in length.
I don't know about that one. I think that, like I said, the last video was way more practical than this one. Not only more practical, realistic, because we're not taking even into consideration the political aspect out of the control of Germany, right? Also, the fact that you have a lot of, Slavic people, man. By that time, what, 250 million? So I thought it was more like, okay, we got some of the land that we lost in the last couple of years. Let's just leave it like that. We have some territories in the Slavic regions, and that's it. But the entire Russia, bro, nah, that's super unrealistic. The rest kind of weird, yeah. But we're not even talking about the United States, right? And the other South American countries as well. But let me know what you guys think, guys. I would love to hear you guys' opinions. Again, this is me just watching these videos and just reacting to it. Nothing else. Meantime, guys, we'll see you next one.